40 Valkyrie soldiers stepped toward the human at once, and the only creature in the room who did not look afraid was the human. That should have been our first warning. His name was Mason Reed, Terran civilian technician, 5 feet 11 inches tall, maybe 180 pounds in training boots, no visible armor, no combat crest, no thermal plating, no shock-resistant bone ridges, no rank markings, and absolutely no legal reason to be standing in the center of the Valkyrie 9th Female Assault Unit's qualification floor. I was there as evaluation officer, which meant I had seen recruits panic before. I had watched decorated fighters freeze when the red lights came on and the arena doors locked. I had watched champions from heavy gravity moons suddenly remember urgent appointments somewhere else. But Mason Reed just stood there, holding a maintenance tablet in one hand, looking at 40 of the most disciplined close-quarters fighters in the sector like he had taken a wrong turn at a community college gym. The room itself was built to intimidate. Black impact flooring, white target lines, gravity tuned 15% above galactic standard, observation glass on 3 sides, ceiling drones humming like insects over a fresh carcass. Every Valkyrie in that room had passed the entry trial by disarming 3 opponents while blindfolded. Every one of them had survived shock drills, zero-light movement courses, and formation pressure tests that left most species shaking for hours. And then there was the human. Soft jacket, plain gray shirt, dark hair cut short, brown eyes, one shoulder strap from a tool bag crossing his chest. He looked less like an enemy and more like someone who had come to fix the water heater. Captain Saren Voss noticed him first. She was 6.5 feet of controlled authority, with silver command bands on both wrists and a voice that could make trained predators sit down. She turned slowly, studied him for exactly 2 seconds, and asked, "Who assigned the male civilian to my floor?" No one answered. That was when Mason raised one hand. Not high, not dramatic, just enough to be polite. "I think there's been a scheduling mistake," he said. His translator gave him a calm Midwestern accent, which somehow made the situation worse. A few of the Valkyrie laughed. Not loud, not cruel yet. Just the quiet kind of laughter soldiers use when something fragile has wandered into a dangerous place. Mason looked around at the closing circle, then down at the glowing red boundary line under his boots. "I'm here for combat calibration," he said. Captain Voss tilted her head. "This is combat qualification." Mason blinked once. "That explains the floor." Another laugh moved through the unit, sharper this time. The outer doors sealed with a heavy click. The arena lights shifted from white to amber. The training system had already registered him as a participant. I remember checking my console, expecting an emergency override. Instead, the screen printed one clean line: subject accepted. 40 Valkyrie began to move inward, boots landing in perfect rhythm, shoulders squared, hands open, controlled, confident. Mason Reed finally set his tablet on the floor, very carefully, like the most important thing in the room was not the assault unit surrounding him, but making sure the screen did not crack. Then he looked at Captain Voss and asked, "Do I get instructions, or is everyone just going to walk at me until something happens?" That was the last moment anyone in the room thought the human was the one in trouble. The strange part was not that Mason Reed had entered the wrong chamber. Mistakes happened on military stations all the time, usually because some translation program decided that one alien word could mean 12 different things and hoped nobody noticed. The strange part was that every safety system on the floor looked at this unarmed human technician and decided he belonged there. My console should have rejected him the instant his boots crossed the boundary. Civilian status. Non-combat assignment. Terran maintenance clearance. Limited station access. All of those warnings should have locked the doors open and sent a polite escort drone to remove him before Captain Voss noticed. Instead, the floor accepted his weight, measured his breathing, scanned his muscle response, and marked him as eligible. That was impossible, so naturally I assumed the machine was broken. I checked his file while the Valkyrie formed their circle around him. Mason Reed, born in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, Earth. Age 31 standard years. Mechanical systems specialist. Emergency repair certification. 0 listed military decorations. 0 listed tournament victories. 0 listed advanced combat licenses. His work history was even less impressive. Cargo lift repair. Gravity pump inspection. Thermal valve replacement. Docking clamp recalibration. The most dangerous line on his record was a note saying he once repaired a pressure leak without waiting for station authorization, which sounded brave until you realized humans considered climbing under broken machinery a normal Tuesday. Captain Voss stepped closer to him, her expression calm in the way thunderstorms are calm before they reach the town. "Human," she said, "explain why my floor recognized you." Mason glanced at the amber lights, then at the ceiling drones, then back at her. "Honestly, ma'am, I was hoping you could explain that." That answer did not help him. Around the ring, the Valkyrie exchanged looks. They were not laughing as much now, but that made it worse. Laughter meant they thought he was harmless. Silence meant they were deciding how much pressure would remove him. One soldier with dark blue cheek markings rolled her shoulders and said, "Maybe Earth males are so fragile the system mistook panic for combat readiness." A few smiles returned. Mason heard it. Of course he heard it. Humans always hear the insult they are supposed to ignore. But he did not snap back. He only looked down at the floor again, studying the lines, the spacing, the distance between bodies, the position of the exits. I remember that detail because at the time I thought it was confusion. Later, I understood he was mapping the room. Captain Voss lifted one hand, and the unit stopped moving. Perfect discipline. 40 fighters froze at once. "You have entered a qualification arena during an active trial," she said. "Under Valkyrie training law, anyone accepted by the floor must complete the opening pressure assessment." Mason pointed gently toward his tablet. "I am still technically on the clock for maintenance." "Then complete it quickly." The room went quiet enough for the drone motors to sound loud. Mason sighed, not dramatically, not fearfully, just like a man who had been asked to work through lunch. Then he removed the tool bag from his shoulder and set it beside the tablet with the same careful patience. No flourish, no challenge, no heroic speech. That bothered me more than fear would have. Every species has a performance before danger. Feathers flare, crests rise, skin changes color, muscles tense. Mason Reed did almost nothing. He rolled his neck once, flexed his fingers, and asked, "What counts as passing?" Captain Voss smiled for the first time. "Still standing when we tell you to stop." Mason nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "That is clear enough." And that was when the first Valkyrie stepped inside his reach. Her name was Rila Mar, third-rank striker of the 9th Unit, and she moved with the relaxed confidence of someone who had never been the smallest danger in any room. She was taller than Mason by nearly 8 inches, built like a professional athlete from a planet where childhood games involved climbing stone towers during windstorms, and the white bands on her forearms marked her as a formation breaker. That meant she was trained to enter a line, disrupt balance, and remove one target without disturbing the rest of the squad. Against most recruits, Rilla did not need a second attempt. Against a civilian human male, she probably thought she would not need a first one. To understand why the Valkyrie were so certain, you have to understand their species. Valkyrie females served in assault units, command wings, heavy boarding teams, and Royal Guard divisions. Their males were diplomats, mathematicians, archive keepers, engineers, and sometimes brilliant strategists, but almost never frontline fighters. There was no shame in that. It was biology, culture, and several thousand years of tradition braided together so tightly that even the idea of a male stepping onto an assault floor sounded like a joke told by someone with poor timing. So when Mason Reed stood there in his plain work shirt, with a tool bag at his feet and no visible fear display, the unit did not see courage. They saw ignorance. Rilla stopped 2 feet in front of him and looked down with a smile that never reached her eyes. "You may step out," she said. "No penalty will be recorded if you admit confusion." Mason glanced past her at Captain Voss. "Is that official?" Captain Voss folded her arms. "No," Mason nodded once. "Then I guess I am still participating." That answer irritated Rilla. I saw it in the tiny shift of her shoulders, the slight tightening of her jaw, the way her left foot angled toward his center line. She expected him to back away. He did not. She expected his breathing to quicken. It stayed even. She expected his eyes to jump around the room, begging for an exit. Instead, they stayed on her hands. Not her face. Not her rank bands. Her hands. That was the second warning, and again, we missed it. Rilla raised one palm and placed it flat against Mason's chest, not striking, not yet, just applying enough pressure to move him. The arena sensors measured the force and displayed it above us in clean blue numbers. 200 pounds of forward pressure. Mason shifted half an inch, then stopped. Rilla's smile faded. She added more. 300 pounds. His boots squeaked against the floor, but his posture settled lower, knees soft, shoulders loose, like he was waiting for an elevator instead of resisting a trained Valkyrie striker. Someone behind me whispered, "How is he bracing?" I did not answer because I had no answer. Rilla leaned in, now using both structure and weight. 400 pounds. The number blinked red for civilian safety limits. Mason finally looked at the display, then back at her. "That seems high for a warning push," he said. Rilla's eyes narrowed. "Stop resisting." Mason sounded genuinely confused. "I thought that was the test." The room changed after that. Not loudly. No alarms. No dramatic music. Just a small shift, the kind predators make when something they thought was food looks back too calmly. Rilla tried to hook her foot behind his ankle and turn him off balance. It was a clean training move, safe, controlled, humiliating when done properly. Mason let her foot touch his, then stepped with it instead of against it. Her leverage vanished. For half a second, Rilla was not pushing him anymore. She was pushing empty space. Mason placed one hand lightly on her wrist, turned his shoulder, and guided her past him in a smooth circle that ended with her catching herself 3 feet away, upright but stunned. No injury, no impact, no anger, just one impossible redirection. The Valkyrie circle went silent. Mason looked at Rilla, then at Captain Voss, and asked, "Was that my turn, or hers?" Captain Voss did not raise her voice after Rilla stumbled out of Mason Reed's reach. That was how I knew she was angry. Loud commanders want the room to feel their emotion. Dangerous commanders remove emotion completely. She looked at Rilla, then at Mason, then at the glowing sensor readout above the floor where the system had recorded one civilian human redirecting a ranked Valkyrie striker with less effort than most beings use to open a stubborn door. "Circle formation," Captain Voss said. The command snapped through the room like a switch, turning off every joke at once. 8 Valkyrie stepped forward from different points around the ring, each one chosen without hesitation, each one spacing herself exactly 7 feet from Mason. Their boots landed on the white target marks in perfect sequence. Left flank, right flank, rear pressure, forward control, secondary capture, tertiary restraint. It was not a punishment formation. It was worse. It was professional. Mason looked around slowly, counting them. I could see his eyes moving from shoulders to hips to feet, never staying where pride wanted him to look. He did not watch faces. He watched balance. That detail crawled under my shell because only trained fighters did that, and his file still insisted he repaired gravity pumps for a living. 8 at once, he asked. Captain Voss answered. Opening pressure assessment, adjusted for irregular response. Mason gave a small nod, as if she had just explained a parking rule. Is there a safe word for this exercise? No one laughed. Not this time. The 8 Valkyrie lowered their centers in unison. Their hands opened. Their shoulders angled inward. The formation was designed to give a target no clean direction to step. If he moved back, rear pressure caught him. If he moved left, right flank folded him inward. If he stood still, forward control locked him down. It had been used on armored boarders, riot drones, and one very confused swamp bear from Karath 6. None of them enjoyed it. Mason Reed exhaled once. Not a dramatic breath. Not a warrior breath. Just air leaving his lungs. Then he moved his left foot 3 inches. That was all. 3 inches. The formation hesitated because the step made no sense. It did not escape the circle. It did not challenge anyone. It placed him slightly off-center, closer to danger, which every rational species knows is the wrong direction. The Valkyrie on his front right advanced first, reaching to control his shoulder while the rear pressure fighter closed behind him. Mason turned his body sideways, and suddenly both of them were reaching through the same empty lane. Their timing crossed. Their spacing collapsed. One had to stop or they would interfere with each other. Mason did not wait for them to decide. He guided the first wrist down, stepped past the second shoulder, and moved like someone walking through a crowded grocery aisle while holding coffee. No panic. No wasted motion. One Valkyrie spun away to keep her balance. Another had to catch herself before leaving the boundary line. A third reached for Mason's arm and found only his sleeve sliding out of her fingers. The sensors chirped 3 times, marking 3 failed controls in less than 4 seconds. Captain Voss leaned forward. I saw it. So did every Valkyrie in the room. The human was not overpowering the formation. He was reading it faster than they could complete it. Then the tallest fighter in the circle changed tactics and came in low, trying to take his legs out from under him with a clean training sweep. Mason hopped over it by maybe 2 inches, landed softly, and tapped her shoulder as he passed. The arena registered the touch as a scoring contact. A scoring contact. Against a Valkyrie assault fighter. The display flashed blue. Mason glanced up at it and said, I think the machine likes me. That was when Captain Voss stopped treating him like a mistake and started treating him like a problem. Captain Voss lifted 2 fingers, and the arena changed its mind about mercy. The amber lights above the qualification floor darkened to red, the observation glass polarized, and the ceiling drones rose higher, giving themselves room to record what the system now believed was a legitimate advanced trial. That was not supposed to happen during an opening assessment. Opening assessments were controlled, clean, almost ceremonial. They measured composure, balance, and response under pressure. Advanced trials measured whether a fighter could still think when the room itself started taking sides. Mason Reed noticed the lights first. His eyes flicked upward, then to the walls, then to the thin vibration passing through the soles of his boots. That feels different, he said. Captain Voss did not smile. The floor is increasing resistance. Mason looked down. How much? I checked the console before answering, because I wanted very badly for the number to be normal. It was not. 30% above station standard, I said. Mason frowned, not with fear, but with the mild annoyance of a man discovering that a hotel treadmill had been left on the wrong setting. That is still under Earth normal. The words landed harder than any strike could have. Rila turned her head toward him. 2 of the flank fighters actually lost their formation focus for half a second. Captain Voss went completely still. Repeat that, she said. Mason shrugged one shoulder. Earth gravity is heavier than this. Not by a crazy amount, but enough. This feels like walking around with a backpack after lunch. Silence rolled through the unit. Not shock exactly. Shock is sharp. This was deeper, slower, the kind of silence that happens when an entire room realizes the joke they were laughing at had been written about them. Captain Voss looked at me. I pulled up the Terran environmental profile. There it was, buried under civilian maintenance notes and medical tolerances, plain as a warning label nobody had bothered to read. Earth's standard gravity exceeded the Valkyrie training floor baseline by a significant margin. Mason had not been resisting them with some hidden device. He had simply grown up heavier. Captain Voss lowered her hand. Full pressure. Non-lethal contact only. Break his stance. The 8 Valkyrie moved again, but this time they stopped trying to guide him out. They tested him. Shoulder pressure. Hip control. Foot traps. Cross angles. A coordinated push from 3 directions that should have folded his balance into the center line. Mason absorbed the first wave with one quiet step. The floor sensors flashed yellow under his boots. The impact panels complained. He shifted, turned, and the force meant for his body passed through empty space, carrying 2 fighters into each other's paths. They recovered quickly, because Valkyrie did not train poorly, but recovery was not victory. Mason was already somewhere else. He was not fast in the way we understood fast. He was efficient. He did not sprint when one step worked. He did not shove when a small turn changed everything. He did not fight the formation like an opponent. He treated it like machinery with moving parts, and apparently Mason Reed was very good at fixing machinery. One fighter reached for his shoulder. He dipped under her arm and tapped her back. The sensor chirped. Another tried to lock his wrist. He rotated his hand through the gap before the grip closed and stepped behind her. Another scoring tone. A third planted herself in front of him with enough confidence to block a service cart. Mason paused, looked at her stance, and said, "You are leaning too far forward." She blinked. He moved aside. She had to take 3 quick steps to keep from crossing the boundary. The console marked her as displaced. Captain Voss stared at the readout as if it had personally insulted her bloodline. Mason breathed through his nose, calm and steady. No heroic grin. No victory pose. Just that irritating human patience. Then the floor beneath his right boot formed a thin crack across the impact coating. Everyone heard it. Mason looked down at the damage and winced. That one might actually be my fault. The crack in the floor changed the room more than the red lights had. Red lights meant danger by design. A cracked Valkyrie training floor meant the design had just been offended. That surface was not ordinary material. It was layered impact ceramic, pressure foam, and memory alloy, rated to absorb drops from armored walkers and the occasional overenthusiastic recruit with more pride than sense. I had once seen a 700-pound boarding drone hit that same floor at full speed and leave nothing but a scuff mark. Mason Reed had made it complain with one step. Captain Voss walked to the edge of the arena and looked down at the damage. Her face stayed controlled, but her fingers flexed once against her wristbands. "Explain," she said. Mason looked genuinely uncomfortable. "I planted too hard." "That is not an explanation. It is the only one I have." That answer should have sounded ridiculous. It did sound ridiculous. Unfortunately, the floor agreed with him. My console replayed the pressure signature in slow motion. No hidden weapon. No energy spike. No mechanical assist. Just a human foot, a shift of weight, and a brief compression load that made our best equipment reconsider its life choices. Rila stared at the crack, then at Mason's boots, then at her own feet as if gravity had suddenly become personal. Captain Voss raised her voice just enough for command tone. "Unit, weapons remain inactive. Restraint tools only. I want proof of method." That was the moment the trial stopped being a mistake and became an investigation. For wall panels opened with soft mechanical clicks. Training bands slid out, thin loops of smart polymer designed to wrap around wrists, ankles, or torsos and lock a recruit safely in place. Safe was the important word. Safe for the recruit. Safe for the unit. Safe for the paperwork. The Valkyrie took them without looking away from Mason. He watched the bands unfold and gave a small nod. "Okay, so now we are using equipment." Captain Voss said, "You may yield." Mason glanced at his maintenance tablet outside the boundary, then back at her. "If I yield, do I still get paid for the hour?" For one dangerous second, nobody understood him. Then I realized he was joking. During a full-pressure restraint trial, surrounded by elite alien soldiers, standing on a floor he had already cracked. Humans, I decided, had either no survival instincts at all or survival instincts so advanced they looked like bad manners. The first restraint band came from his left, low and fast, aimed at his lead arm. Mason did not pull away. He stepped toward it. The band tightened on empty air as he turned his wrist through the loop before it could close. A second band swept toward his legs. He lifted one foot, let it pass underneath, and placed that same foot down behind the attacker's stance. She froze, realizing he had not escaped her. He had moved into the one place her own balance could not defend. Mason touched 2 fingers to her shoulder. The scoring tone sounded. Another Valkyrie came from behind with a double band capture. Mason ducked, rolled his shoulder, and the bands crossed harmlessly in front of him, tangling together like garden hoses in a garage. He looked at the knot for half a second and said, "You may want to recalibrate the tension sensor." Then 3 fighters moved at once. That should have ended it. The bands formed a triangle around him, each line cutting off a direction, each Valkyrie adjusting to the others with beautiful discipline. Mason dropped his center of gravity, so suddenly the system lost his height reading. He slid under the first line, turned through the second, and guided the third band around a support post at the edge of the practice lane. The smart polymer locked exactly as designed, just not on him. The entire triangle formation stopped dead, anchored to its own equipment. For the first time that day, Captain Voss looked surprised. Not angry, not insulted. Surprised. Mason straightened, brushed dust from one sleeve, and looked at the trapped restraint band humming beside him. "For the record," he said, "I really did come here to fix something." That sentence should have been harmless. It was not. The Valkyrie heard it as mockery, even though Mason Reed delivered it with the tired honesty of a man who had spent too many years explaining obvious mechanical problems to people wearing expensive uniforms. Captain Voss heard something else. I could tell because her eyes moved from the tangled restraint bands to the cracked floor, then to Mason's hands. She was no longer asking whether he was dangerous. She was asking what kind of dangerous he was. "Release formation," she ordered. The trapped smart polymer unlocked and recoiled into the wall with an embarrassed hiss. 8 Valkyrie stepped back, not defeated, not frightened, but careful now, and careful was already a confession. They had approached Mason like a misplaced civilian. They were beginning to circle him like a live engine with the safety cover removed. Captain Voss touched the command band on her wrist. The arena floor projected 3 pale rings around Mason, each one 12 feet wider than the last. Adaptive unit drill, she said. My console flashed a warning. Adaptive unit drills were not for opening assessments. They were reserved for soldiers who had already passed advanced movement trials. The system would introduce changing terrain, directional pressure, noise distraction, and non-lethal training tools at random intervals. It was designed to overload decision-making. Most recruits failed in under 90 seconds. Mason looked at the moving rings beneath his boots and asked, "Is this still the same test?" Captain Voss answered, "It is now." The first terrain shift lifted a section of floor behind him 3 inches. The second dropped the left lane. The third lit the boundary markers in false patterns meant to confuse footwork. Mason did not move for one full breath. Then his expression changed by the smallest amount. Not fear. Not anger. Recognition. "Okay," he said. "Now I understand the rules." 3 Valkyrie entered at medium speed with padded pulse staffs held low. Not lethal weapons. Training tools. Still, each one could deliver enough force to end a normal recruit's attempt and send them to recovery with a very educational bruise. The first staff came toward Mason's shoulder. He stepped inside the arc before it had room to build power. The second swept toward his side. He turned his hip, let it pass, and used the attacker's forward motion to guide her past the target line. The third feinted high and changed low. Mason hopped back, not far, just enough, and the staff tapped. The floor where his ankle had been. The sensors marked 3 missed contacts. The Valkyrie adjusted immediately. Good soldiers do. 1 went high, 1 went low, 1 circled behind, and 2 more entered from the outer ring. 5 now. The room filled with motion, boots, breathing, humming tools, shifting panels, and Captain Voss watching all of it without blinking. Mason was not untouched anymore. A padded strike clipped his sleeve. A shoulder check pushed him half a step. A staff brushed his ribs hard enough for the sensor to flash yellow. The unit felt that small success and surged. That was their mistake. Humans do something strange when pressure increases. Most species narrow. Humans organize. Mason's breathing settled. His movements shortened. His eyes stopped reacting to individual fighters and began tracking the entire pattern. He saw the formation, the floor, the tools, the timing, the tiny delays between decisions. Then he started taking space away from them. Not dramatically, quietly. 1 step forced 2 Valkyrie to share a lane. 1 turn made a staff block another staff. 1 palm on a padded shoulder redirected a charge into an empty ring. He never struck hard. He never lost control. He simply kept arriving where the unit needed him not to be. The scoring tones began to stack so quickly my console compressed them into a single continuous alert. Rila entered again, faster this time. Pride sharpened into focus. She reached Mason's flank at the exact moment the floor dropped under his right foot. Perfect timing. Perfect angle. Perfect trap. Mason fell with the drop instead of fighting it, touched 1 hand to the floor, spun through the lowered lane, and came up behind her with 1 finger pressed gently between her shoulder markings. The sensor chirped. Scoring contact. Rilla froze. Mason stepped away before she could turn. Captain Voss stared at the board. 5 Valkyrie displaced. 2 formation breaks. 7 clean scoring contacts. 1 human technician still standing. Mason looked down at his torn sleeve, sighed, and said, "I am definitely not getting my deposit back on this shirt." Captain Voss finally stepped off the observation line, but she did not enter the arena yet. That mattered. A commander like Voss did not move without purpose. She walked along the boundary with her hands behind her back, studying Mason read the way engineers study a machine that has started making a noise no manual explains. The unit waited for orders, breathing harder now, pride contained but not gone. Valkyrie discipline was not fragile. They did not collapse because a human surprised them. They adapted, and that was why the 9th unit had a reputation across 7 sectors. Captain Voss tapped her wristband twice. The floor projection changed again. The wide rings vanished, replaced by a tactical grid, each square lighting and fading in rotating patterns. "Formation lattice," she said. My throat went dry. The lattice was not about surrounding a target. It was about predicting one. Every fighter received a movement assignment through her wristband, and each assignment changed depending on what the target did. If Mason stepped left, 2 fighters would close from the right. If he stepped back, 3 would cut the angle. If he paused, the forward pair would lock the lane. It was not a circle anymore. It was a living net. Mason looked at the grid, then at the Valkyrie wrist bands blinking in sequence. "That is actually pretty clever," he said. Coming from anyone else, it might have sounded respectful. From him, standing in a damaged shirt on a cracked floor with half the unit breathing hard around him, it sounded like a repairman admiring a toaster before taking it apart. Captain Voss gave the order. 12 Valkyrie entered the lattice. Not 8. 12. The room moved all at once. No wasted steps. No dramatic charges. Just clean military geometry closing around one human who still had no armor, no weapon, and apparently no sense of when he was supposed to look impressed. For 3 seconds, the lattice worked. Mason stepped away from one lane and found another already blocked. He turned out of a shoulder line and met a second pair waiting. A padded staff touched his upper arm. The console scored it. A restraint band brushed his boot. The unit adjusted tighter. The observers behind the glass leaned forward. Someone whispered, "Now they have him." Mason heard that too. He looked toward the glass for half a heartbeat and said, "Almost." Then he changed the problem. Until that moment, he had been moving like a target. Suddenly, he moved like part of the system. He stepped into a square right before it lit, forcing 2 Valkyrie to follow a command meant for after he left it. He slowed when the lattice expected speed. He accelerated when it expected hesitation. He let one fighter block him just long enough for her own assignment to interfere with the next fighter's path. The perfect net began tying knots in itself. I watched the console try to update, fail, update again, and fail faster. Mason was not overpowering 12 soldiers. He was making 12 correct decisions become wrong at the exact worst moment. One Valkyrie raised a training shield to cut him off. Mason placed a hand on the edge, turned with it, and the shield became a moving wall between him and the next 2 fighters. He released it before anyone could call it a grab. Another came in low with a restraint line. Mason stepped over the line, guided it around the shield carrier, and the system politely scored the Valkyrie as self-restraint. A sound moved through the room. Not laughter, not fear, something between disbelief and professional pain. Captain Voss understood before the rest of us did. Her jaw tightened. "He is not fighting the formation," she said quietly. "He is auditing it." That was the most terrifying sentence I had heard all day, because it was true. Mason Reed, Terran maintenance specialist, had looked at the pride of Valkyrie assault doctrine and treated it like a faulty elevator schedule. The lattice collapsed 17 seconds after it began. Not physically. No one was harmed. No one fell hard. But every lane was blocked by the wrong fighter. Every restraint line was out of position, and every scoring angle belonged to Mason. He stood in the only open square on the grid, breathing evenly, one hand raised as if asking for permission to speak in class. "I found the issue," he said. Captain Voss stared at him. "What issue?" Mason pointed at the blinking tactical grid beneath their boots. "Your formation assumes the person in the middle wants to escape." Captain Voss did not answer immediately, and that was the first time all day I saw the 9th unit become truly still. Not disciplined still. Not waiting for orders still. Still in the way a room becomes still when the weather outside suddenly sounds too quiet. Mason Reed stood in the center of the failed lattice with one sleeve torn, dust on his shoulder, and the expression of a man who had just diagnosed a problem nobody else wanted to admit existed. "Your formation assumes the person in the middle wants to escape," he repeated, a little softer this time, as if he thought maybe the translator had missed the point. But if the person in the middle wants to control traffic, the whole thing starts working for him. I looked down at my console. Every replay supported him. The Valkyrie had not made mistakes because they were sloppy. They had made mistakes because the system kept giving them perfect answers to the wrong question. Captain Voss stepped over the boundary line. The arena recognized her instantly. The lights changed from red to white. The drones lowered. The damaged floor sealed off the cracked panel beneath a thin caution field, as if the room itself was trying to stand up straighter for her. "Clear the floor," she said. 12 Valkyrie withdrew at once. Rila hesitated for half a second, eyes still locked on Mason, then stepped back with the others. Now it was only Voss and the human. That should have restored order. Captain Voss was not a training obstacle. She was the standard the unit measured itself against. 6 feet 6 inches tall, 20 years of command experience, undefeated in formal close-quarters trials, and calm enough to make panic feel unprofessional. Mason looked at her wristbands, then at the open floor between them. Are we still staying non-lethal? He asked. Always, Voss said. Good, Mason replied. I have had a weird morning, but I would like to keep my job. Voss moved first. Not fast for show, fast for results. She crossed the distance with a step so clean my eyes almost rejected it. Her first contact was not a strike. It was a test, a precise reach from Mason's shoulder line meant to read his reaction. Mason gave her one. Too much of one. He shifted exactly where the unit drills predicted he would shift, and for one bright second I thought she had him. Then Voss stopped. Her eyes narrowed. She had seen the bait. Mason smiled, just barely. You are better than the floor. Voss answered by changing rhythm. No formation, no pattern, just command experience, pressure, and timing that had ended careers politely for 2 decades. Mason backed up 3 steps. 4. 5. The unit watched hope return to their faces. Voss angled him toward the caution field near the cracked panel. Brilliant. She was using his own damage against him, limiting his space without touching the hazard. Mason glanced down once. Voss took the opening. Her hand closed on his sleeve, her foot cut the lane, and her shoulder position turned him toward a clean restraint. It was perfect. It was also 1 inch too close. Mason folded with the motion instead of resisting it, turned under her arm, and stepped into the space her own balance had just vacated. Voss adjusted instantly, but Mason had already placed one palm lightly against the command band on her wrist. The arena tone sounded. Not a warning tone. A victory tone. The entire room froze. Captain Voss looked at the point of contact, then at Mason's hand, then at the scoreboard above us where the system displayed one impossible phrase. Command capture complete. Mason released her immediately and took one respectful step back. No celebration. No smirk. No insult. Just a tired human in a damaged shirt asking, does that mean I passed the equipment test? Captain Voss stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she turned toward me. Update his file, she said. My fingers would not move. To what classification? Voss looked back at Mason Reed, the civilian technician from Earth who had walked into the wrong room and corrected our doctrine by accident. Not civilian, she said. Not recruit. Mark him as environmental hazard, friendly unless provoked.